Hello, and welcome to another episode of For the Love of Sports. My name is Michael Rasile. This is a show where we get to talk about sports, we get to talk about business, and we get to talk about everything in between. Wherever you're listening, however you're listening, like and subscribe on YouTube, 5-star review on Spotify, and 5-star review and leave some nice words for me over on Apple Podcasts. More importantly, today, my incredible guest, I have Greig Carlson. He's a former walk-on at USC, might have won a couple national championships, but we'll get to that. He's an entrepreneur, and he is the CEO and founder of Hall of Goats. Greig, how you doing today, man?
Good, man. Appreciate you having me. Good to be here.
Pleasure is all mine. Excited to talk about NFTs and blockchains and national championships and marketplaces. But before we get to all the fun stuff, Greig, first question I have for everybody on the For the Love of Sports podcast is, why do you love sports so much?
Oh, man. Sports is so critical for my life just because I grew up playing it. That's where I met all of my friends as a child. And it led me to places that still to this day shape my career and my circle of friends and, the people that I interact with. I think sports opens up so many doors for people. Um, and that's just my personal experience. But aside from that, just being a fan of sports, appreciating the time and effort and dedication that it's required to play at a high level, no matter the sport. I remember when I first got out of college, one of my best friends and roommates after college played college soccer and played in Europe. And I would think, growing up, like soccer, like, dude, soccer is like whatever. The minute you try and play it, you realize just how skilled those guys are. And I am left-footed, but it felt like I had two left feet trying to dribble the ball. So, so sports is fantastic. I mean, it brings communities together. You get these incredible like moments in time where things happen in sports that never should happen. And, that's why we play the game, because it doesn't always unfold the way that people assume. And I mean, obviously, incredible businesses established around sports. So I think sports is fantastic, and it's done a lot for me personally. But I think that it's got a huge place in this world as well.
It really does, and it's always something. You can go to any country in the world, right? And there's some sort of sport that they love. Maybe it's cricket. I have
Hmm.
no idea what's going on, but you go to India, cricket's their NFL times 10. Like, it's
Right.
absolutely bonkers, like what they're capable of. So like in soccer, I just started watching soccer only because in the pandemic it was the first sport that came back. So I said, you know what? I'm watching a bunch of soccer now. It's the only thing that I can get my some sort of competitive fix, just to watch green grass and a ball. Like, that's all I really need, right? On a Saturday and a Sunday morning. So I
Hmm.
100% agree with you, man. And you said something in there that I think is really important too, right? To this story specifically, opening up doors with sports. Like, right, all these businesses that are possible. Right? A couple years ago, it was really just, if you want to work in sports, you're gonna sell tickets, or do you want to become a sports agent? Now
Hmm.
you can think of literally any opportunity in sports. If it doesn't exist already, it probably should, and maybe you're the person to do it. So excited to talk to you a little bit about some of the cool stuff that you're doing. But opening up doors, I think, is really important in the world of sports, right? I always love talking to former athletes, and specifically athletes that played on big teams, right? You played for USC, spoke to multiple NFL athletes across, and it's just like, hey, man, when you have that shield, when you have the, Greig Carlson, USC football player, right? That after your name, that comma, USC football player, that carries a lot of weight, especially when you're in college.
Hmm.
Especially when you're in college, especially if you're from a big team, especially if you're in the area, right? So I'm sure you felt a little bit of that, and I'm excited to kind of dive into some of that. So yeah, let's just talk about. I mean, you walked on at USC, won a couple national championships, roommate with Matt Liner. I mean, this is like already starting to sound like a fairy tale. I guess, like,
Hmm.
where do you usually begin your story, Greig?
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, I grew up playing um, football in the San Fernando Valley in suburbs of Southern California. Um, I was a pretty good player, so that led me to, a network of guys that played in a different area of Los Angeles, and they kind of recruited me to go play over there. And I left one school to go play at another, and it turns out that my offensive coordinator at the school that I played at as a senior, his name's Steve Clarkson. He's somewhat of a quarterback guru, especially in Southern California area. He was really good friends with Norm Chow, so who was the offensive coordinator at USC at the time, and he said to Norm, "Hey, I've got a player for you that I think you should take a look at." And at the time, USC didn't have any scholarships available, but I met with Norm and he said, "Hey, Steve thinks the world of you. So, I'd like to invite you to come walk on at USC and see how you do." So I did that. And in my second year, I secured the starting punt return role and ultimately earned a scholarship that fall because of the work that I did on the field. But it was because of sports that, broadened my network and allowed me an introduction to Norm Chow and USC.
That's incredible, man. And there's a couple pieces of that story that I'm going to touch upon a little bit later in the conversation, I think. But, I mean, I just got to ask, like, big school, LA, what's it like winning a national championship there, man? Like, is it what I think? Like, you don't have to go into specifics because I think we might get arrested. But, like, is it what I think it is? Or am I not thinking big enough? Is it bigger?
Well, I think, offline we could talk about what your idea of big is and mine. Look, I'll tell you this. Our first year we weren't what we became, right? Our first year we were 6-7 or something like that. Went to a bowl game, got beat by Utah at the Las Vegas Bowl. And like, that was a fun experience. Don't get me wrong. You're playing college football. You're still at Southern Cal, which is an awesome school. And there's plenty of, networking opportunities and things happening in Los Angeles. But it was that next year when we started to realize we were pretty good as a football team. And the 2 years after that is when we won the national championships. What I say is this: when we were playing at USC, there was no professional football team in Los Angeles. So when we did start to make a lot of noise in college football, it was a massive, deal and momentum, I think, in Los Angeles. We would have thousands of players on our practice field, and the Coliseum had a capacity of 92,000 in every single game. That place was rocking with 92,000 people. And from high school to college, it's a big transition, right? Because you're on such a much bigger space. You're on so much of a bigger stage in college than you are otherwise in high school. So we're getting police escorts to every place that we go to, right? Hotels are all 5-star accommodations. There's just zero that you have to worry about as a player. And it felt really special and really big. And then you look at the sidelines and there's Snoop Dogg and Nick Lachey and Will Ferrell and the who's who of entertainment in Hollywood is sitting on the sideline there to watch us. And, we were winning and all of that was really awesome. A really fun time for sure. So we enjoyed it. Yeah.
It sounds like a really fun time. I mean, when you look back on it, does it even seem real? Because like you've come so far and doing so many other things, like looking back and thinking like, man, 18, 19, 20-year-old me, like, as you said, you had no worries in the world, 5-star hotel accommodations. Like, that's got to be just so surreal looking back on something like that.
Totally. Like, you're a young kid and you don't know what you don't know. And
probably don't appreciate it either,
you
right?
don't
It
even
was just
appreciate
giving it to you
right?
and you're like, this is life. It's like, actually, this is not life. This is for 3
Totally.
years and you be grateful for it.
And that's, I know we can get into this later for sure, but like this NIL opportunity that these kids are finding themselves in today, where kids are making $30,000 up front for deals because of their celebrity while in college. But the reality is if they don't turn out to be professionals and they have to go get a real job, they'll soon realize that that $35,000 that was handed to them is no longer a thing. They're going to go have to, work 40 hours a week for, 10 months out of the year to earn that $35,000. So, a lot of these guys are probably, and girls are in for a rude awakening at some point. But
I was
I
going to
love,
say,
mhm.
35K can only get you so far in Los Angeles, like after
Sure,
that,
yeah.
right? Like it's only going to get you so far, really, just
Yeah.
anywhere in the country, but Los Angeles specifically, it might not get you as far. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, you know, these kids are in for a rude awakening, and once they're done with these glory years, and by the way, I'm all for this NIL change because I think that these kids deserve everything that they get while they're playing sports.
Well
So
deserved.
that's all.
Very well deserved. How someone can take advantage of their own name, image, and likeness was absolutely ridiculous, and now here we are, and I'm grateful
Yeah.
for it. I'm glad for it. might need some guardrails at some point, but we can kind of dive into that a little later in the conversation. While you were at USC, you know, when we spoke prior, you said there was a professor that really kind of, I don't know, I'll let you use your words, but you kind of likened to him, mentor, maybe that's a good word to use, and he really helped kind of guide you down now where you are, the tech entrepreneur path.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me about that relationship, tell me about that professor and how you guys kind of, I guess, you know, became friends.
So my first semester at USC, I did not manage my time very well
What?
as a as a student
18-year-old kid
athlete.
not managing their time? I don't believe you.
So my grades suffered. My academic counselor said, "Hey, like if you have another semester like you just had, there's a good chance you get thrown out of this school." So they recommended that I took this class, which was taught by, can I say his name? And that doesn't matter, I imagine, right?
Hey man, it's your friend, not
Yeah.
mine.
So it was taught by a professor named Anthony Borges, and the class was technology entrepreneurship. Um, Anthony happens to be a USC alumni, was a former athlete, track athlete, and part of the Greek system. So I enroll in the class thinking, hey, this is just going to be one of those, they call them bird courses because you fly right through them, right? So I'm in there, I take a look around. It's nothing but other football players and athletes. And then half the Greek system is in there because they're just frat guys and they're probably thinking the same thing that I am. But I remember him kicking off our first lecture with making money on the internet and in technology and introducing new concepts like RFID tags and things like that that I'd never heard of. But as soon as I was introduced to them, my mind just started racing in terms of like different applications and how those things could make money and in business and yada, yada, yada. So I would, on a daily, basis after the lecture, I'd come up to him, start talking to him about things that were racing through my head after the lecture and different ways that I thought businesses could, use technology to generate revenue or different opportunities and things like that. And he says to me, hey, like, seems like you're the only one actually paying attention in this class. So why don't you, when football is all said and done, this was my freshman year. So he said, when football's all said and done, um, why don't you come work with me? So I throw that into the back of my head, and the rest of the semester was awesome between us. And then we ended up becoming friends. I would help him with getting, autograph signings of some of the guys on the team and tickets to some of the games. And he would introduce me to business folks in his network and kind of showing me the ropes. And then a few years later, we played Texas in the Rose Bowl. We lost the game, and I called him the day after and I said, hey, just checking to see if you might have a vacancy in your company. He had a startup that, this was pre-smartphone, right? So this is thinking feature phones like the Razr flip phone and the Motorola this and the Nextel that and the chirp phones and all kinds of stuff, right? There were 300 different devices across North America. He had a startup that would take mobile titles and port them so that they would work across all the devices in North America. So he hires me right out of college. I went to work for him like that Monday. He gave me a job at his startup. I was doing business development and just finding accounts that wanted to play in this mobile, like very early mobile web era. Um, and then 6 or 7 months later, that company got acquired by Konami Digital Entertainment, big Japanese video game publisher, and we worked at Konami. I did for 2 years roughly, and that was my first taste of like a bureaucratic, like big company with thousands and thousands of people, and yeah, that was like the next phase though.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, right? Like you had to be kind of an idiot 18-year-old to fall into this class where you were then introduced to this professor, right? Like you were probably, thought, oh, I'm doing so bad, like all these things are wrong, your parents are angry at you, right? But now you look back on the story, and if it wasn't for all of those mess ups, you wouldn't have gotten here, right? Like I
Yeah,
always look
yeah.
like looking back and kind of forks in the road situations. It's just pretty
Hmm.
cool to see something like that. And it sounds like, yeah, obviously it worked out. Did you get equity in that first company before it was bought?
I did
Nice.
actually.
Hey,
Yeah,
we'll leave it at that.
yeah,
Congratulations.
yeah. Got a couple
Congratulations.
options. Yeah, no,
Good
it's
for you.
great.
Good for you. I
Eh,
always love.
Yeah,
I always ask people in startups, did you get equity? Because that's really what we're here for, right? Changing
yeah,
the
yeah,
world, but also, we're here to make a couple bucks. So I think
totally.
that's pretty darn cool that you get that opportunity. And then, so again, you're starting to see the right RFID tags. This was 2003,
Yeah,
two,
2002. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Okay, RFID tags. Most people probably don't know what an RFID tag is, but they or more that so they don't realize how often they use it. Maybe I guess is a good way to say it, right? Like
Totally.
they're pretty prevalent, right? Like so being into this 20 years prior to it being kind of commonplace, you then get into mobile applications, which again, 20 years prior to 10 years, let's call it, 15 years prior to it being extremely commonplace.
Hmm.
Like what is it, what are you doing, or what is it about you that allows you to see something and either accept it and say yes, this is a good idea, or have the foresight to say, this might be pretty damn important in a couple years,
Hmm.
let's kind of travel down this path for a bit.
So I spend the first 15 minutes of my mornings always looking at news, trying to make sure that I stay up to date with things that are happening in the industry, and and just educating myself the best that I can to try and stay on top of everything. Like technology happens so fast, um, and because of my daily routine, I think that it helps me identify trends potentially. So, I mean, not that when the iPhone launched, it wasn't that I was the one that had the foresight to understand that, oh, the iPhone was going to dominate. I just thought that that was a crystallizing moment where a big enough company made a special enough piece of hardware that would allow an ecosystem to be built around it that would, you know, service billions of people in the right way. So when the iPhone came out, and mind you, I had tons of experience in the feature phone market, and I saw that there was a disruptable spot in that space where if somebody could figure out how to make one great device and ecosystem that took all of the friction and hurdles out of all the different specs across hardware because the devices were different, and the fact that AT&T has its own ecosystem and database, and Verizon has its, and Sprint has its. I felt like the iPhone when it came out I felt like this was the opportunity for a major company to bring all of this fragmentation, all of this opportunity into one kind of approach, and that's the opportunity that I saw when the iPhone was released. And then when their app marketplace came out, I was like, oh yeah, these guys are doing it the right way. This is kind of what I envision long term. And that's when I decided to jump headfirst into smartphone application development.
It's so easy to not see that though, right? Especially in the business that you're in and what you're doing. Like your livelihood is attached to needing all these different devices, doing all these different things so that you can be one of the providers to help push everything across these devices, right? So
Hmm.
almost out of a like I don't want it to happen, so I'm not going to believe it type of thing, right? Like it's
Sure.
very easy to fall into that mentality. But clearly you're open-minded enough and, again, have the foresight to say, well, okay, maybe right now I won't be able to make the same dollars or this might be disruptible, but if I get smart and start being able to develop these applications, now I
Hmm.
have the opportunity to grow even bigger. And so many people will take the easy route, right? So many people will take the comfortable route of, no, I don't think it's going to work. Let's stick with what's currently working. Why do we need to change it, right? Everyone hates change.
Sure.
But now, obviously, you went the right route. So you get into the app development game, correct?
Yeah. I started doing that in 2009, 2010. Yep.
And so 2010, so those apps still kind of like sucked,
They were terrible, right? Yeah. Yeah.
right? Like,
It was early days, right? The developer tools weren't all there. There wasn't a huge pool of talent that was well versed in this. So, for me, it was a lot of trial and error and experimenting with different groups in China or Brazil or India or the Ukraine and all these different places, and finding um, developer talent that some I had to cut ties with and fire, and then the ones that proved to be worth anything, I kind of maintain relationships with. And then designers too, right? Like user experience designers. I had to go through a dozen of those before I found somebody that I felt like could really deliver on all the stuff that I wanted to build. So yeah, there's definitely some trial and error involved in all of that stuff.
Again, I think it's awesome though the fact that you're able to kind of. I mean, did you ever make any wrong moves? Was there anything that you were like, "This is coming up. This is the next big thing," and it turned out to be a total dud?
I mean, look, the jury's still out on that one, right?
That's
Like,
okay. Good
you
point.
know,
Good point.
it's still
I'm
early
not rooting for
days.
this either. I'm rooting for you, man. But like,
No,
I
no,
gotta ask.
yeah, no. Look, there's probably maybe like an idea. Well, so yeah, I've had a few ideas that didn't pan out, right? And some of it is market conditions or timing. Some of it is execution, in all honesty, right? Me just being young or naive or inexperienced and not knowing how to execute completely. Some of it is putting too much trust into others and not, seeing them execute to like the understanding of the relationship necessarily. Um, so yeah, I mean, sure, I've had plenty of failures and some small things that aren't things that I would consider huge failures, but I mean, every day as an entrepreneur, you've got ups and downs and things that you're battling, and some days it's awesome and great, and then an hour later it can be the world's falling apart. So, um, yeah, I've made plenty of mistakes along the way. Yeah, I think when it comes to, the iPhone and my pivot into smartphone application development, right? Like I think that I do have one characteristic is, being open-minded to your point earlier, but seeing the writing on the wall too, right? So, I didn't think that feature phones were going to last once the smartphone devices started to hit the market. So maybe I just saw the writing on the wall and that was enough for me to go and try something new. And to your point, you're gonna earn less money up front, right? Because you're going and pivoting, but ultimately it's what's better for me and my career path. So
Yeah, yeah. It would have been pretty boring if you were still in feature phone app development, right? I don't know how many people even have those anymore. I feel like that's
third world
significant.
countries, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. Hopefully they
Yeah,
get those iPhones soon, though. Maybe those iPhone 8s coming in for them.
there you
No,
go.
I think that's a little insensitive, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah, yeah.
So again, going back to seeing the writing on the wall, having that foresight, being able to look at things. So you start developing as well. Recently, started developing an NFT esports marketplace, right? So back top of the pandemic, I think it was right around the beginning of the pandemic. NBA Top Shot was going
Hmm.
bananas.
Hmm.
When it came out, I thought it was the dumbest thing in the world. Do I still think it's the dumbest thing in the world? It's not the dumbest, but it's one of the dumber things, right? Why am I? It's you don't own the clip. It's licensed,
Yeah,
and there's nothing attached to it. You just own a GIF of Alex Caruso with a layup.
yeah,
Still doesn't make any sense to me.
sure.
But Top Shot brought NFTs to the absolute forefront of the internet for a significant period of time, and it's still obviously very, very towards the forefront. But when Top Shot happened, that's when I feel like most of the world, right? You might have been a little deeper into it, but most of the
Hmm.
world, that's when we really heard about NFTs and like, what the heck is fungible anyway?
Hmm.
Never even
Hmm.
heard this word, right? I'm sure you had that conversation a million times. So talk to me about the progression of understanding NFTs when you really got into this with the blockchain and seeing Top Shot, I guess the in between there and seeing
Hmm.
Top Shot and what it did to the internet and then hopefully making something a little bit better.
Yeah, so 2018 is when I started like um, experimenting and diving deeper into cryptocurrency in general, right? So Bitcoin mining, Ethereum mining, and then looking at all the different coins. And in 2017 was like the wave of ICOs and things like that. So I had a pretty, general baseline knowledge of cryptocurrency and coins. 2019 is when I started to hear rumblings of NFTs, and then 2020 is when I first, saw the Top Shot product, and I thought when I saw it, like, this is super cool. And I think I was a little naive when I first started to see it because I didn't think about the fact that it was licensed and that you didn't own that moment necessarily. So I didn't understand the business aspects of it entirely. But I did think to myself, wow, this is super cool. I think that this could be replicated in an esports model. And what I mean by that is taking, I'm a big fan. I'm a video gamer, right? I watch a lot of Twitch content, so a lot of streamers on Twitch. And I think that, for them, one of the product offerings that they could have is the ability to create highlight clips from their streams, turn those into digital assets and sell them to their fan base and develop a deeper, more engaged community through ownership in those digital assets, right? Rewarding that fan base for supporting them from a digital asset perspective. And, look, the way that I look at it is like, Mike Trout has tens of thousands of baseball cards in the world, but Mike Trout has no idea who is a fan of his that owns that digital baseball card. I think that the blockchain is really fantastic in this application because we can take a snapshot at any time, and a content creator can see specifically who his fan base and ownership group is, and reward that group based on that. So I think that that's real powerful stuff.
Yeah, I've never heard about it I've never heard it put like that before. I think that's a really cool way of because yeah, as you said, with the blockchain, you can see exactly who owns it, where it is in the world, right? Like all of that stuff,
Hmm.
which is super darn cool. And yeah, you're right. Mike Trout has a lot of baseball cards because he's absolutely incredible, one of the greatest to ever do it.
Hmm.
But that is yeah, it's a really interesting way of putting it. I've never really kind of heard it like that. So you're a big gamer, so you have this idea. So what's it like working with all these different esports organizations, Greg? I'm sure it's super easy, and you were able to put this together and went off without a hitch.
Yeah, so turns out, just like the NBA Top Shots and licensing that product with the NBA, Call of Duty is owned and operated by Activision, and they own the content rights for that. And then on the flip side, trying to wrangle 10 esports organizations in the Call of Duty Professional League is a lot like herding cats, right? When I was, describing the business to these orgs, most of them hadn't even heard of what NFTs were at the time. So there was an education around that. Um, and turns out that none of them actually want to play in a sandbox together, even if it's for the greater good of the industry, of them as an organization. They didn't, they just felt like they could go, run their businesses on their own. And what's interesting is esports organizations, historically aren't even profitable, right? You look at FaZe Clan, and they're I guess they're SPAC, and they went public, and they're 50 million in the hole last year, or 30 million in the hole. One of the two. I apologize if I misquote it, but they are not producing returns as of right now, and 95% of them probably aren't. So it was I was curious as to why there was so much pushback on it. So all the while I was going down that road trying to wrangle cats, the NIL decision comes down last July, and the NIL stands for name, image, and likeness, and that ruling changes it so that high school and college players can now make money off of their name, image, and likeness. And I thought this was the moment where my experience as a former athlete, my network with, Matt Leinart and all the guys that I played football with and what they were currently doing, and my technology background and my understanding of this digital asset space and blockchain. And I thought that this was the moment where all of what I had been kind of working on the last 15 years was that intersection in time where I thought this is exactly where I need to be.
I love that, man. I think that's important. Now, I do want to, before we start talking about Holo Goats and everything that you're doing on the NIL
Hmm.
side with these athletes, I do want to talk just a little bit more about NFTs, right? Because
Sure.
again, my first introduction to him was Top Shot. I thought it was dumb. Still think it's dumb. It's cool if everyone likes it. It is. It's a fun product, right? It's essentially just baseball cards, right, or
Yeah.
basketball cards. It's cool.
Yeah.
I've got nothing against it. It's
Sure.
interesting moving basketball cards. But I think the important thing that people, I've had multiple people on, so thankfully I know a little bit more than the next guy about NFTs. But I think the important thing is those contracts that are tied to the NFTs, right?
Hmm.
Like there's these smart contracts that have utilities attached to them. So if you own it, you actually get something. It's not just a GIF on your phone with Top Shot, right? You actually get something when you're working with NFTs. So if you don't mind just giving us like a crash course, a 2-minute, maybe even 1 minute on like the utilities that can come with something like this before we kind of dive into Hall of Goats and everything that these athletes are getting and the people that own the NFTs are getting.
Right. So you know, the NFTs are great because of the technology, the underlying technology, the blockchain for one, which is a transaction ledger that you can immediately verify ownership of an asset. Because of that, you're able to offer utility and access to NFT holders in various ways. I think the first wave of NFTs were these 10,000 randomly generated PFP projects, Bored Apes, CryptoPunks, and those are your blue chip type of NFT projects. They're great. They're not going anywhere. I think that you saw the cash grab with the gregarious giraffes and the pretty penguins and all this other nonsense that had very shallow roadmaps and no true utility or thought process behind them. So I think that wave, that initial wave of NFTs is all but dead. I think to your point, the smart contract is where the value lies in these NFTs. At some point in the not so far future, right? I'm going to be able to sell my home through a smart contract. I won't have to go to escrow and title and get all this verified paperwork and sign my name 900 times in a 50-page document to transfer ownership of a home, right? That can be a digital transaction, and it can happen like that. There is a documentary called Who the F is Jackson Pollock? I don't know if you've seen or heard of the documentary, but long story short, Jackson Pollock used to send artwork to his brother who lived in Riverside, California, or San Bernardino or something, and his brother would sell these things when he was low on cash, right? At the time, it wasn't what a Jackson Pollock is worth today. Anyway, some lady ends up getting a hold of one of these Jackson Pollocks from a garage sale or wherever it was, and the art community says, nope, that is not a real Jackson Pollock. It's not worth the $20 million that it should be worth, so no chance. The forensic science comes in, scrapes the paint off of it, matches it to the paint in Jackson Pollock's garage where he painted it, and the art community still says no. Well, with digital assets and the blockchain, that won't happen. I can immediately, even the process for physical baseball cards, right? If I own Mike Trout's, 1 of 10 baseball cards, I have to spend $25 to ship it to a grader, pay that person $150 to grade it, verify it, and then ship it back to me. That's a 3-week process and just cost me $200 on top of what I spent acquiring the Mike Trout baseball card. Well, now, Top Shots might be a silly product to you, but if there's somebody on the other side willing to buy that product, it can happen in the snap of a finger, right? It's not some complicated process. It's a digital asset on a ledger. I have the ability to send it to somebody if they pay me what I'm asking for it at fair market value or whatever that is. That's the power, that is some of the power of NFTs and smart contracts, right? There's so many more applications that I think have yet to be seen, right? There's something called financial NFTs where you can unlock, if certain things happen in the world financially, it unlocks an NFT that releases value or some other monetary compensation to friends or family, living trusts. There's all types of different applications that we'll see in the next few years as it relates to NFTs. To be honest, I don't even know that they'll be called NFTs. I think smart contracts is a better term for it. I think that the nomenclature changes as the sentiment of these things in the market. So we'll see where that lands in a few years, but I think we're just scratching the surface on what digital assets ultimately are.
Yeah, I mean, if half the things that you said are true and happening, right? Like, what are the other things that, you or I or some kid in some random country hasn't even thought of yet, right? All of these opportunities, and if it's as seamless as easy, people will. We love convenience here. We love convenience. So if we don't have to sign our name 900 times, and you could tell me I could just snap my fingers and the house is sold. I'm probably once I see it happen a couple times, probably going to go and do that. And I consider myself a little more conservative when it comes to that stuff than other people. So I do think that That is pretty cool. So let's talk about Hall of Goats. So everyone get out their bingo card. NIL NFT blockchain-based game. I love it. It sounds like a bingo card, and I think you did a great job at that, Greg, making sure you got all those buzzwords in, right? But talk to me a little bit. What exactly is it? I want to understand the NIL aspect of it. I want to understand the NFT aspect of it, and then obviously the game, as you said, we've touched upon NIL, NFTs, and the games that you love, right? How did you come up with the idea to just smash all these things together?
So NIL is the big opportunity, the big shift in the industry, right? Now that kids can make money off of their name, image, and likeness, this is the opportunity for these kids to live on forever in a video game and have, long tail revenue opportunities for themselves, right? 98% of kids aren't going to go pro, but some of them are going to have some of the most storied careers in college imaginable. In order to go on to the NFL or the NBA and have truly successful careers, there's so many factors and variables that take place that ensure that somebody goes on to having an incredible career, right? You could be sitting, look at Tom Brady. You have to sit behind Drew Bledsoe. He's got to get hurt, and then you get your chance, right? You've got to be in a system that's going to, allow you to develop as a player. You have to have the right coach, the right GM, the right ownership group, the right roster. There's so many variables. You have to stay healthy. So there are opportunities for kids in college and in high school, right, that will never have that professional career, but they are at their peak in this high school college moment. So let us help them strike while the iron is hot. So this NIL opportunity is really the big change in the world. And, we are able to tap into that through the video game, right? There are all these NIL opportunities out there, whether it's NFT platforms or merch platforms or whatever those may be. But the video game is our way to capitalize on this NIL space, bring in athletes into this video game, and let them generate revenue from their initial drop as a digital avatar, and then all the microtransactions that happen in game that everybody's familiar with. The big shift here is from this Web 2, paradigm shift to this Web 3, which is true ownership in video games and digital assets, right? If I am, a player that plays Fortnite, a gamer that plays Fortnite, and I spend $1,000 on skins, when I walk away from Fortnite, those skins live in Fortnite, and I never get to do anything with them, right? So for us, there's three opportunities, in our business model, right? There's three ways to make money. That initial avatar drop, then all of the in-game transactions, microtransactions, digital merchandise purchases, season passes, all of the traditional in-game transactions, and then secondary marketplace transactions, right? So if I buy a Caleb Williams or a Matt Leinart game avatar, and I level it up and I sell it on the secondary marketplace, those players earn a royalty percentage on all those secondary marketplace transactions. So, EA and your current video game publishers are limited to that in-game transaction bucket. We've got this player avatar drop where we earn money, those in-game buckets, and then the secondary marketplace transactions. And it's not just players, right? All the content that is unlocked within the game can be looked at as digital assets, right? Whether I have a dance, a celebration, a taunt, digital merchandise, or any of these, customizable things for my characters can all be viewed as digital assets, which can be sold on a secondary marketplace. So for us, the gamers really have ownership in the time and money that they're investing in a game, and can actually realize some profits, or at least earn some of that revenue back in time back through the secondary marketplace.
That is awesome, man. I think that it's just such a cool opportunity for athletes to get involved with, right? Just to have this digital avatar, as you said, multiple ways to make money. The long tail, I think that's the important part, right? As you said, so many of these athletes, they have to strike while the iron's hot, I think, to use your words, to at the peak of their celebrity, to take advantage of their NIL, because once they leave college, it's right. It's like driving a car off the lot. Once you drive the car off the lot, it's worth $10,000 less, or whatever that number is, right? We all heard that silly saying. So unfortunately for these athletes like that if they do not go pro, especially in something like football, their star is going to fade relatively quickly. Unfortunately, right? Whether it is what it is. We're very much a "what have you done for me lately" society, for better or for worse. So with that though, how do you even develop something like this? the NFT side of it, the actual game, like what is it? Is it just like you brought up EA and like so is it the next CFB 23 or something? Like how are you guys like developing the actual game? Because if the game sucks, no one's gonna want to care about
Sure.
the avatars, right? So how are you guys making sure that the game is fun and like what exactly is it?
Yeah, so we've got an idea. So from a game perspective, we're looking at a very different model than EA's Madden or NCAA, right? Those are full sims. Those are like a 30 to 40 minute sit down on your couch experience, right? They have mobile versions, but it's the same
Yeah,
same kind of experience. For us, we're looking at a 7 to 10 minute arcade style experience. So it's 7 on 7,
nice.
big hits, big physics, dancing, taunting, celebrations, talking shit. Um, and then customizing. And then, what we found in our research is that even Madden players, if you take 100% of their time spent on the game, 50% is playing the game, and then the other 50% is on the auction block just managing their team. So that's where we think that the opportunity lies is building an arcade style game that's really fun and approachable and easy to pick up and play. It's a 7 to 10 minute experience, so it's geared towards a mobile audience. And we're building it in Unity and able to deploy to mobile, PC, web, and console eventually. Um, and it's just a completely different experience, right? We're not trying to compete with Madden 1 to 1 in their game. We are trying to come at it from a different approach, and really make the athletes the star of the game. And we think that arcade style is what really offers and lends itself to that.
Totally agree, and we're seeing that. We've seen it in NBA for a very long time, right? It's the stars.
Hmm.
People are fans. I'm a fan of LeBron, right? Not as much anymore. I'm kind of over his shit, but like I'm a fan of LeBron. So wherever LeBron's going, I'm rooting for that team to win. I couldn't care
Sure.
less what team he's on, as long as it's not the Sixers. Like I'm gonna root for him. It's cool.
Hmm. Hmm.
But like it's just so interesting that now we're starting to see it a little bit more in the NFL, right? Kids are Patrick Mahomes fans. They're Justin Herbert fans. They're not Chargers fans or Chiefs fans. They're fans of
Hmm.
that athlete. Odell Beckham. I think that's another big one, right? I'm up here in the New York City area. So many people flock to be fans of Odell. Then he goes to. I mean, I rooted for the Rams to win because I wanted Odell to get one too, right? Like it's that personality shift that you're only going to see it in the star players, right? Unfortunately, the defensive linemen, the offensive linemen, maybe like middle linebackers aren't going to get all the love that they deserve. But at the
Hmm.
same time, those wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks are absolutely going to get the love, and the fandom will travel with them wherever they go. So I totally agree with you. And yeah, that arcade style like NFL Blitz, like dude, let's go. That's going to be awesome.
Yeah. And the other way that we ensure, right? Like that's just the game concept, but we're hiring top tier game studio talent, right? So these guys have run studios that have shipped EA's Madden for a decade and NCAA and Fight Night and all these huge sports titles. We're bringing in that talent to run our studio to make sure that we build a kick-ass fun game. And really, like our goal is to build a fun game that has, staying power. We're going to layer in the digital avatars of the athletes, but as a gamer, you won't even realize necessarily that there is a blockchain element to the game.
Hmm.
From our perspective, we just want you playing a fun arcade style college football game. And the perk to playing our game is that you'll be able to buy and sell players and become a GM, so to speak, and
Yeah.
extract some of the value from the platform when you ultimately sell your assets.
Yeah, that will be a lot of fun, right? Free to play game, and then it's the transactions within it. Yeah, the buying, the selling, the actually being a GM with these college athletes, I think will be super cool. So I'm
Hmm.
curious, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Like, I'm sure some of this is happening in tandem, right? Creating this game and making sure that it's going to be fun, but you have these grand ideas. Are you going to the current athletes? Are you going to old friends like Matt Liner and Reggie Bush and saying, hey man, like you could be the legends in the game, right? Like you
Hmm.
guys have the opportunity to be in this just from a legendary standpoint. Like how are you kind of building out both aspects of it to make sure that you don't launch the game with only 10 athletes and they're only USC guys versus hey, you have to.
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah.
people want to see something before they really dive into it.
So we are signing athletes, right? Like we don't have any difficulty getting to any athletes. To your point, we are signing former legends and current players in
Love it.
at the same time. And our go-to market strategy is pairing a current star at a school with a legend from that school and pitting them against a rival of a current player at that rival school with a legend at that school also. And you take USC's game against Texas in the Rose Bowl years and years ago. Um, one of our taglines in our marketing campaign is, rewrite history, right? So you buy the athletes from SC, you buy the athletes from Texas. Once they're into the game and you're able to play them, you can change the outcome of that game, if you will. So to answer your question, we're going after current and former players, right? And that's the other thing, right? I think what this game provides is the ability for us to reach out to former legends in college and bring them back into the fold and make them relevant again and surround the current players with these former players that they want to be around because, they followed and they're effectively following in their footsteps and grew up watching them play. So it's cool and it's fun to see the excitement around the current players working with former players and then the former players coming back to the schools and being relevant again in a way. So that's certainly part of our strategy is leveraging both current and former athletes.
Give me a little Caleb Williams dumping the ball off to Reggie Bush for
There you go.
some Vince Young handing it off to Bijan Robinson. Man, I'll watch that game 100%. I would love to watch that game again. That USC Texas game was also one of the greatest college football games I've ever watched in my entire life. We don't want to talk about that too much, though. I apologize. So I think that's such an awesome concept. How much? Now I'm just kind of on the curiosity train. How much you want the players, right? The people that are the kids, the adults playing the game. You want them to have as much customization as possible. But how much do the athletes themselves get, right? Like, do they get to pick what their hairstyle looks like, or like how deep do you go into that side of it, right? Because you need it to look like that person to some extent, right? Like, so I guess I'm kind of curious, like, how much say do they have in this whole thing?
Yeah. So before we start on character development, right? We actually have a design brief sit down with each athlete and talk about their hair and the accessories that they might want and things like that. So they have a large piece of input on their ultimate design, which has been cool because they get excited about it too. And you know, this game won't feature helmets, right? It will just be character faces. Um, so that's cool, because some of them have earrings or braids or whatever it is that they want to kind of make sure that gets included in their brand. And it's been fun to see their reactions to how cool some of these things come out.
That is
So
awesome. I think
yeah,
that's really important, right? As you said, we're trying to lean into star power. If you put a helmet on someone's head during the game, can't really see it, right? So I
right.
think that part's pretty awesome. I know we're running up against time here, but I do have another one last question for you. I mean, I have a million more questions now that we're really getting
Sure.
into it, but my one last question, we spoke about EA a little bit, right? EA Sports 2023, NCAA 2023, going to be coming out. We're all super hyped about it, right? I had 2004. I had the Mario Manningham one. I can't remember if that was 2004, 2003, whatever.
hmm
Loved it. Absolutely fantastic. The game was incredible. Now athletes have the opportunity to get paid for being in this video game, right? But
hmm
it's on these group licensing deals. It's not on these deals where it's like, hey, CJ Stroud, you're going to get what you deserve because people are going to play Ohio State because you're here. No, you're playing Ohio State because okay, so what is going on? So how are you guys kind of almost the antithesis to that, making sure that the athlete gets really what they deserve rather than
hmm
hey, there's 150 of you and you guys can split this X dollars however you want. Doesn't
hmm
matter to me.
hmm Yeah, so because we're 7-on-7, right? We don't need as many players for our game, and we're giving these top tier athletes an opportunity to go seek out what the market is going to dictate, right? So, they've got the ability to sell their digital asset, their digital avatar that will go into the game, and let the market decide what their popularity is, right? And if they have a chance to generate, $60,000 worth of digital avatar sales, great, good for them because, they've earned it and the market says, yeah, you deserve this. And I think that's the real opportunity, right? And we're also starting to hear that top tier talent, especially, is opting out of big group licensing deals because there is a fair market value out there, and they want to go see what that looks like.
I think that's super important, and kudos and congratulations to you. My actual last question before we get to socials and where can we learn more. The
Sure.
contracts themselves, do the athletes again get say into what goes into those smart contracts? What are some of the standard things you guys have been seeing so far when signing these up? Because I think again that's the coolest part about the NFT is what you actually get outside of just owning that digital avatar at this point.
So when it comes to the smart contract, those are all built the same across all the players. The individual contract, right, the written contract does vary from player to player because some of them are, they want a shorter term or they want, we ask for promotion on social. We also ask for game worn items so that we can give those things away to their fan base and help them interact. And, we try to guide the athletes on our platform with tips and tricks for how to engage with their audience in different ways and reward their digital asset holders. Um, I think that the nuance of the contracts varies from player to player, but that's in the written contract. The smart contract is the same across all the players at this point.
Very cool, man. Awesome. Well, Greg, this has been absolutely fantastic. Now, my last question: where can we find more? Your socials, Hall of Goats. Learn a little bit more about the game. When's it coming out? Give us all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so hollogoats.com is where you can, get a link to our Twitter, our Instagram, and our Discord. Please come follow us and follow the journey. The game isn't slated to come out until December of 2023 or January of 2024. Don't quote me, but that's what we're aiming for. Um, and in October, we'll actually release like a sizzle trailer about the game and the company and um, the value proposition for our gamers and our athletes alike. So stay tuned for that. That'll be dropping in October, and then our first drops with player avatars will happen in November. So
When
that's
you say
all right around the
October,
corner.
do you mean October like in 2 weeks, October?
The game trailer will probably be in 6 weeks from now, 5 to 6 weeks from
wow.
now.
Let's
So it's right around the
go.
corner.
Good stuff, man. It's starting to become real. That is incredible. Well, a lot of hard work went into it. You guys have done a lot of cool shit to get here. So I'll make sure all of that is in the show notes for everybody. Greg, thank you so much for your time. Thank everybody
Yeah.
here for their time. It's the only thing we don't get more of, so I really appreciate you giving me some of yours. But other than that, man, good luck, kudos, congratulations. Keep changing the world, and let's get it, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks, Michael. Appreciate you having me, man. But it
All
was
right.
a blast.
It was an absolute blast. Appreciate it, man. Bye, everybody.